Hey, welcome to 49cc Scoot. My name's Brent. About a year ago, I put up a video called Garage Makeover, and in that video, I started showing you the process of me trying to refinish and better organize one area of my garage. The intention, of course, was always to finish the garage, but in that video, I only showed you about half of the garage because that's all I got done in that period over the winter last year. This winter and early spring, I've managed to finish up that project, or you know how projects go, but I'm gonna call it finished for now. And I wanted to give you a little bit of an update to show you the finished project. And in addition to that, I've also had a lot of people ask me about maybe doing like a toolbox tour or just showing you guys around the garage. So I'm gonna do that as well in this video. In the original video, you saw me working on this side of the garage. I basically painted, there was a line right around here somewhere. All this was painted and refinished, and everything over here was still undone. So obviously, I finished up this side over this winter. Let me start with just giving you a quick look around the side that I finished. And here's a full 180 view of the garage as it is now. Here are some before and after photos to compare. This video won't show you the actual process of me doing this side of the garage. I did that in the first side, and most of the processes were the same, so I didn't really see a need to repeat it. However, I do want to go over some things that I did over here that I think are worth drawing your attention to, or maybe will give you some pointers or ideas for your own projects. I'll start here with the shelving area. So this shelving area has been here for a really long time. You can certainly find plenty of options for storing things like paint cans and bottles of cleaner. But this has been very cost effective, and it's held up, like I said, for many years. So the top is basically 8-inch, I think it's 7.5-inch shelving here and here. And then the rest of it is nearly 6-inch. I believe they sell it as 6, but I think it was like 5.5-inch shelving. Goes all the way around the top. Then everything else is 3.5 inches deep and about 2.5 inches tall, with a little border here just to keep everything in place. And that's a pretty good snug fit for cans. You can see I've got plenty of room to put whatever I want in there, but nothing's falling out, and it works out really, really well for me. Next to that shelving, you'll see this big storage area, this shelving unit. I put one of these up on the other side of the garage last time, and I was so impressed with the amount of storage that that thing creates. You can customize exactly how you fit these racks in and how much room you have. And it's sturdy enough you can still fit a bunch of stuff up on top of it for even more storage area for things that I don't use a whole lot. So I definitely wanted another one of these. They are fairly expensive. I caught this one on sale. I think last time I paid around $350 for the one over there. And then this time it was about $280. Really creates a lot of room. I was happy that I could keep my shelving here inside of this shelving. I've got nice access to things I use a lot, like I keep dirty rags and clean rags now in 5-gallon buckets. For those of you that do a lot of work in a garage, that might be a good tip for you. I used to use a lot of shop rags and paper towels and just regular rags and toss them out, but now I actually will take them and put them into a dirty bucket, and then I go wash them and reuse them. Now, some things it's not really appropriate, so if you're getting like metal flakes on things, you don't want to put them in the clean rags bucket and then pull it out and go wax your bike or whatever. But it can be a handy tip so you don't spend so much money and you don't waste so much just trying to clean various things around the shop or garage. Over here in the corner of the garage are the stairs, and I spent a good bit of time over here trying to make sure that I did these well, because I wanted everything to be durable. And it would have been a lot easier just to paint everything either black or white, but I wanted them to match the theme with all of my benches over there on the other side of the garage. So Most of it is white, but all of the tops are black. So each stair top and the very top platform here. This is all porch floor paint because I've had pretty good luck with the porch floor paint so far with everything else in the garage. Seems to be a little bit more durable than a standard paint. For the platform, I wanted to go beyond just painting it. Even though this is a porch floor paint and should hold up to this sort of thing, I do bring in groceries from outside. I'll usually put them up here and kind of slide them across so I can take them into the house once I get them all stacked up there. So I didn't want to be sliding things across and scratching the paint up and then have to refinish it or just deal with it not looking so great. So I put down the same 1/8 inch thick rubber mat that I used on top of the workbench. That's been working out so far pretty well on that, so I figured it should hold up to this. I cut it very close to the shape, spent a lot of time trying to cut it out to the right shape and size to fit up here, and then just put some edging on here to hold that down. That way you don't trip over anything, and also it keeps it pretty secure. This has been done for more than a month, I know, and so far no issues. You can see it does show the dirt and dust a little bit, so if you're really concerned, you'd have to clean it all the time, but to me that doesn't bother me. Still looks a lot better than what I had going on there, and again, so far so good. It's been pretty durable for me. I also added this second railing here. So this was here from the day that the garage was built, but there's never been anything over here to hold on to, and most people won't need 2 railings. But my parents are in their 70s. My father has a lot of hard time getting around. And also, some of you probably know, I broke one knee when I hit a deer on the scooter. So I don't even get around that well. I don't enjoy going up and down stairs, and sometimes have my days that are better than others. So this just gives you a little extra something to hold on to. And actually, it's easier to hold on to with the sort of oval shaped railing than it is with this big railing over here. So now you can go up and down the steps and make sure you feel secure. Since I needed to pick up more of the rubber mat for the top of the stairs over there, I also picked some up so I'd have additional, and I did this lower tier here of my lathe area. My drill press used to be sitting on a small stand that I made, but more or less that was just going to take up room. So I took it off of that and attached it to this bench or this cabinet that I had. Once I attached it, I found that it bounced up and down like crazy because this is just an 1/8 inch steel top with no real support. So I ended up welding in a bar right across here, front to back, and now it's pretty secure. I don't have it bouncing up and down anymore. I also finished cleaning up my stereo in the process and getting that wired. So I replaced the speaker mount over there. It was just on a big ugly shelf. And then I put it on another speaker mount, just like the other side of the garage. You can see I didn't take any great care in running the wires. I didn't go and actually put them in the walls. It's just not worth it to me. But I did try to run them along the seam up top so you don't see them everywhere, and then down the seam here. Obviously they're pretty visible, but I tried to keep it as clean as I could. I did sort of finish off the stereo with a subwoofer here. This is a 15-inch Kicker Soliberic square L7 subwoofer. I used to use it very long time ago, but I just don't have another amp for it. So I finally picked up a Class D plate amp that goes right in the back of the box. It's nice and clean. And it's only 300 watts, but that has been more than enough for this thing. With a bass boost turned on and whatnot, I can easily shake the vinyl siding on the outside of the garage. So way more than I actually need out here, though it's kind of fun to play with. I didn't do a whole lot to this wall over here. You can see I painted up to the first garage door there. A lot of the reason I didn't want to paint it is because I do have these storage areas there where you can see I've got some metal bars and stuff there. And then when we get over here to the corner, over there in that far corner, I store some more metal stuff. With the wooden walls, it doesn't worry me to pull stuff in and out of here. If it does scrape up against the wall, it's not really going to do anything to it unless you were really being aggressive. But if I paint the wall, even the porch floor paint is not going to hold up for very long to metal pipes and that sort of thing, or metal bars over there scraping up against the wall. The other option would be I could put in a sheet of metal or something, I thought, but then that gets pretty expensive to put the metal in there, and you have to figure out some kind of finish on that. So between that and then the idea that I had to mask or work around every one of these garage doors, I didn't feel like it was worth it to me. When the garage doors are open, you really don't even see or notice much of the wall anyway. I did finally insulate the garage doors. The rest of the garage, walls, ceiling, all of that have been insulated for almost the entire time the garage has been here. So it's about time I got to this. Honestly, one of the biggest motivations for me insulating these doors was not the obvious of temperature control. It was actually because I live on a road with a 50-mile-an-hour speed limit. I know you guys, if you watch many of my videos, you've heard many vehicles going by. One going by right now, tractor trailer. So I was hoping to eliminate some of that in my video. I thought it'd be really nice if I could dampen the sound, which is why I went with the fiberglass style insulation. Because the foam board kind of stuff, I had read that the fiberglass type or the stuffing type was much better for sound deadening than the foam board. So I went with the stuffing kind, but unfortunately it still didn't make a whole lot of difference there. I will say, when the sun is hitting these doors in the morning, because this is facing east, it does make a huge difference on the amount of temperature, amount of heat that transfers into the garage. The garage will stay much cooler when the sun's beating on these doors now, so that's kind of nice. But I was pretty disappointed in the sound deadening. On 2 of the doors, I went ahead and taped everything in, just like you see here. I've got white Gorilla tape just to match everything all the way around all of the edges. The reason that I did that was because when I read online reviews about these, people were saying that these little clips here, these little pegs, would not hold this insulation to the door properly, that just didn't work right. I, however, found that it seems to be fine without it. If you look over here, I haven't finished the 3rd door yet. I've got the tape to do it, I just haven't got around to doing it, and it hasn't been a big deal. The one interesting thing is it has tested that theory of all the online reviewers, and this has been up actually since late December or the beginning of January, and it hasn't gone anywhere. I've had no issues with it coming out. I will say though, these clips, they're basically prongs on the back that clip together with other prongs, and I found that they were kind of loose and you could pop them out fairly easily. So all I did was push this back, and I put a zip tie around there, tightened it up, and then pushed it back as far as I could get it. So it just holds those tabs that are on the back of this really tight together, and they're not coming out. I have had no issues whatsoever. I will finish taping it at some point just so it matches everything else, but I don't need it to secure this to the door. The only other thing that I did to this wall was I hung a few motorcycle helmets up there that I'm not going to use anymore. I used to toss all my old helmets out, but I had these around and I thought it would be kind of cool just to display them, I guess you'd say, in the garage. So they're just up there. It's just standard hangers, and I tightened this chin strap together and just hung them off the hanger with the chin straps. Now I'd like to give you an update on some of the things that you saw in the first garage makeover video. So number one, in this shelving unit, I thought it was really cool that I could take these tubs and store my riding gear in there. So I would store my helmets in there, gloves, jackets, whatever, and then I would just kind of lay whatever jacket and helmet I was using at the time the most on top of them. Well, I found out very quickly that is a terrible, terrible idea, because if you put your riding gear inside of one of these tubs and close it up, I guess just imagine sealing off like a gym locker room or a gym locker. So you sweat in your gear and that sort of thing, and then you just seal it all in a container, and it smells horrible the next time you take it out. So really quickly learned that was a terrible idea. I do store some gloves and a few things in one of these still, but I do have some of those little, I think they're like baking soda or whatever kind of deodorizers in there that seem to help. But for the most part, I keep it all outside, and I actually moved it so now I hang my jackets up over here. That way they keep a lot fresher. My initial thought was I would keep my jackets out of any kind of dust and debris in the garage, but it turns out they are kind of their own worst enemy, much more than worrying about that debris. And now a little bit of an update on the area that I'm in the most, the actual work area above the workbench and all this pegboard sort of stuff. Number one, I have really enjoyed having this around. It's been a much nicer area to work in than I had before. The other thing I've kind of learned along the way is to sort of respect my workbench a bit more. I used to just kind of beat the crap out of this thing and not worry about it. And now I've learned that it's a lot easier just to kind of take care of it. So even though this is plywood with an 1/8" steel top and then a rubber mat on top of it, I still keep this chunk of board around, just some old plywood. And if I'm gonna be beating on something or doing something nasty, I'll just put that on top of there, and then I don't have to worry about tearing up my workbench. So I know to some people it's gonna feel like, you know, why do you even have this sturdy workbench and all this stuff on it? But you'll just have to trust me, it is so much easier just to tear this thing up or mess it up than it is to do that to the workbench and then have to refinish that or pay the high price for a large chunk of rubber matting and all that kind of thing. I've been very pleased with this wall control up here. So basically metal pegboard. My only real complaint about this stuff is that it's way, way more expensive than if you were just gonna put up some standard pegboard, put a little bit of wood slat on the wall and throw some pegboard up there. That would be much cheaper. But this stuff has been durable. It's not all skinned up or anything. And I think it will last me many, many years. So I'm pretty happy with it. I've never been used to keeping tools over my workbench. Not really anyway. For the most part, I would just go grab everything out of the toolbox, pile it up on the workbench when I needed it and go put it back. And I still do that with the majority of the tools that I use, but it is kind of nice just to have a few wrenches hanging around here, some Allen wrenches, a couple of screwdrivers, big hammer. This is like my favorite hammer. It's overkill for a lot of stuff, but I kind of use it for everything. And then of course, I finally got into the modern era and I bought a Milwaukee combo set here. I've got a drill and an impact driver, and these have turned out to be wonderful tools, especially the impact driver. I use this on all sorts of like small scooter fasteners and things. Obviously, you still need to use torque specs, but just removing something, wow, you can take it apart so much faster. I can't believe it took me this long to finally get this thing. And of course, the cordless drill is nice because you could see in the last video of the garage makeover that I was climbing ladders with cords and stuff. And obviously that's not ideal. I don't like ladders in the first place. So having cords around my feet while I'm on a ladder is not cool. So really, really nice thing to have around and just nice in general. But I'm really, really happy with these M18 fuel products too. They seem to be really tough. Got 2 chargers up here and I've got 2 of the big XC 8.0 batteries in there, the 8 amp hour batteries, because I also have their pole saw and string trimmer. Kind of unrelated, but pole saw is a really good tool. I like that quite a bit for trimming the trees out here. The string trimmer works well, but we have a large property, so I'll spend over an hour with a string trimmer a lot of times if I do everything. And I did go through both batteries all the way and didn't even complete everything around the property, so that kind of eats batteries a lot. Yeah, I kind of like the gas ones a little bit still in that area, but anyway, both quality tools. Really like the whole system. So other than that, yeah, I keep, can see some discs and whatnot for my grinders, just to make them easy to have around. And this thing has been really nice. So this is just a magnetic bit holder. This one is a Nico. I believe it's essentially the same thing if you go and buy it from like Harbor Freight, for example. There's probably a ton of them that are similar, but I've really liked having this around. Obviously, since I've got the impact driver and drill now, I can just keep stuff up here, grab it out of there, put it right back in place. Everything's pretty handy. Also picked up a set of these impact metric Allens. Really, really handy to have around. I keep them right there. I also keep pens and pencils and markers and such right here. I've got some scissors, a scribing tool. I keep the long extensions for the impact up here. Some cutters, a pair of pliers, flashlights. I guess I'm getting old now, so I've got a magnifying glass because sometimes it's kind of hard to read main jets and that sort of thing, so just nice to have that handy. Some squares and that sort of stuff. And then chemicals that I use a lot. I use like a 50-50 mix of Simple Green and water very regularly, so I keep that right here with a rag. Alcohol, brake cleaner, carburetor cleaner, WD-40 glass cleaner, that sort of thing. Over here, this stuff I don't usually use a whole lot, but you got a couple of torches, some mineral spirits, acetone, and then some sort of random scooter stuff that all my collection of sliders and tapes and that sort of thing. Down here below the bench, I've got a bunch of small part storage. So there's a little more behind the trash can there. I got really lucky with these. I had two friends that worked at a auto parts store, and the auto parts store was getting rid of all of these storage bins that they had for, I guess they got something new in place. But anyway, so I got these 3 racks here for free. They just came up and gave them to me. And these are super handy for storing nuts and bolts and fasteners and all sorts of things. Just below the workbench, some power tools. Still got my old corded drills and that sort of thing, and sanders and jigsaw. Now we can move on to my first actual toolbox. So this is just a little box that my father gave me. He was a mechanic for most of his life, and he bought this cheap from somebody he worked with, and I've used it for just scooter tools basically. This is more or less scooter stuff and things that I use a lot when I'm right over here. Obviously you can see I've covered this thing with whatever scooter stickers I happen to pick up. So it folds up like this. The top here is a bit of a mess, but this is where I keep a lot of chemicals. So we've got thread lockers and sealants, 3-bond, we've got glue, super glue, you know, all that kind of stuff. I keep most of that right up there. Go through the drawers real quick for you. So this one, some double-sided tape. I just keep it wrapped up in wax paper so everything doesn't stick to it. It doesn't stick to this. More double-sided tape and some shoestring. I think I was using that to polish something, wrap it around sandpaper and go back and forth and it'll spin around. Over here, hollow punch set. Use that a lot for making gaskets. Standard hole punch for paper. You can also use that for gaskets really quick. Bunch of these little carabiner links, whatever they're called. Got those for free from an office that was going out of business. Some plexiglass. Use this stuff for CCing cylinder heads, that sort of thing. Over here, we've got a bunch of brushes, various brass, steel. These things, I use them for cleaning. Like, they're kind of nice to get inside a wheel sometimes. Some of these scooter wheels where they got recesses. You can use them to put grease on things, all sorts of stuff, toothbrush. Got drill stops in here. Spark plugs. I'm a 2-stroke guy, so I need a lot of spark plugs. Maybe not this many, but I definitely need quite a few around, or I like to keep them around. And some spark plug caps. Then, let's see, we got some miscellaneous sort of valve tools, valve lapping tool. We got valve adjustment tools in here. These are actually some spare valves, and some of these I had cut, like this one, to make a cutter for cutting valve reliefs in pistons. And then we've got various spacers and mounting things for all sorts of random work that I might do on mostly scooter engines. Some specialty sockets and such that I've made, a couple that I bought in there. We've got some tire markers, paint markers, just sort of some random bits in there, magnetizers, some tire plugs. It's a lot of tire and wheel stuff here. Keep valve stems around. Valve tools, valve pullers, valve stem pullers. These are little things I made up on the lathe to go in where a valve stem would go in the hole in the wheel. That way I can hang a wheel if I want to paint it. Weights for balancing. You'll also notice these little trays. You'll see a lot of these in the toolbox. I bought a kit of these off of Amazon. I'll try to put a link in the description. They have come in very, very handy for this. They're surprisingly nice, didn't cost a whole lot of money. And like you can see, for stuff like this is a lot better than just throwing them in a drawer. I actually left some spare room in this because with some of the organization that I've done to both toolboxes, I had a little extra room, so rather than fill it up, I left a bit there. I'm sure I'll find a use for it, but in here we've got like a piston pin puller. I bought that for the small scoots and then found that it was just a little bit too big, so maybe I'll make my own or something, a smaller version someday. Variator locking tool for a 139 QMB, piston ring stuff, yeah, chain breaker, some various mounting things for, I made these for degree wheels and whatnot on pit bike engines, flywheel pullers, spark testing tools, spring pullers. Let's see. Got tire stuff here, rim protectors, tire irons, tire spoons. I've said it before in videos, but I do really like these MotionPro, BeadPro tire irons because they have a bead breaker in there. Take this little section here, put that under the lip of the rim, get that in there, and then you do like that to kind of pop the bead off. It may take some time, but it is an effective way to do it. And now I can't fit it back in there. Yeah, so some gauges, tire plugging stuff, more rim protectors. This is kind of random, like welding tools here, the magnets, some syringes for measuring various things. Got my sort of access tools, I call them, magnets for picking different stuff up. Got these little pincher kind of things. You can grab something with a little hook that's on there if it gets lost. Flashlights that are flexible, all that kind of stuff. And finally the bottom drawer. This is a lot of drill stuff for the most part. This is a spare cable for my Fordham rotary tool, but you can see a lot of different small bits and such for the Fordham. And then these are all carbide burrs here and here. They're just organized basically by double cut and single cut. This one's out of place. Got a bunch of drill bits here. These are either spares or just different things, like really large bits like that, countersinks. Brand new bits I just keep in there, that way I know they're new. We've got a drill bit set for used for carburetor jet sizing, but half of these are broken because I've had those since I started working on scooters, and they're very tiny. Extractors and bolt removers and stuff. Another set of drill bits that I've had around for years. I try to keep these sharpened because even though I keep drill bits up there over top of the workbench, if you dull one out or it's not working, it's easier just to grab one out of here than to try and sharpen it right away. I won't go over everything here, nothing exciting really. Below both the lathe cabinet and this cabinet is just storage of scooter parts. I mean, I got main jets in here and carburetors and all, like pretty much anything I'm keeping around for the scooters. Bearings, seals are in there. Yeah, that's basically what's under all of this area. Now we come over to the Mini-Lathe. If you didn't know, this was given to me by a few forum members years ago. One of those things that I didn't even know that I wanted or needed it really until I got it, and now I can't imagine working out here without it. It's super, super handy. Now this is just basically a cheap Chinese Mini-Lathe. This isn't some like ultra expensive fancy piece of machinery. However, it gets the job done. I'm greatly appreciative that they gave this to me, and like I said, really can't even imagine some of the projects. I wouldn't have done some of the projects that I've done without this here. So if you do a whole lot of custom projects, especially involving metal in the garage, might be a good idea to look into one of these. You will probably be surprised just how much you like it and how much use you get out of it. And in a more garage makeover related note here, I have really liked having this backsplash here, this vinyl paneling or whatever it was called. Comes in really handy. The lathe, you notice they do come with a backsplash sort of thing, a catch pan, whatever you want to call it, that sits back there. But I never have kept it on there. It kind of makes it easier to access stuff without it there. So that does mean it will sling. If you put oil on anything, it's going to get slung on the wall. So now it's really easy to clean off of this. In general, I've liked this going down the whole length of the workbench. It's held up pretty well. I will say there are some issues with it sticking to the wall occasionally, and I may have to push it back on. Haven't had too many. I'm wondering how it'll hold up long term, but now it's been a year and some months, I guess, and it's still there. So I think if anything, if it really starts failing, it's either going to be, I guess you could replace it, but most of it will probably be in good shape still in the face, so either re-glue it somehow or maybe just screw it down or something like that. But yeah, it's really nice to have, especially behind the lathe that slings a lot of stuff. Try to keep all my lathe tools mostly organized over here below it. This is just going to be some bits, some carbide cutters, some hand ground cutters, whatever, replacement tips for the carbide cutters, various little adapters, and then all my little quick change posts already set up. So I have most things that I'm going to do for most tasks. I can just grab something out of here and pop it into the tool post. And then over here, Just a little custom cutter thingy that I had made for the lathe. This holds a dial indicator. It was super cheap and makes it really quick to set up a dial indicator on some parts. And then I just got like random things that I need or use for the lathe, like a little brass hammer for trying to true stuff up, and some needle nose pliers. These are a good idea to keep around because if you've ever worked with a metal lathe, you know that some of the stuff, the chips are very, very sharp, especially when you get the ones that don't really break and you just get the swirls. Pick those things up, they can be like razor blades. And then just either random tooling, some gears in here, or just random small bits of metal that may come in handy at some point. Got a couple of slide out drawers down here. I like to keep some sandpaper and Scotch-Brite kind of stuff, steel wool around so I can sort of polish something up on the lathe. Deburring tools in there. Then some more sort of random stuff. Yeah, this is a lot of sort of randomness as well. I got adapters. This is my two-stroke leak tester and various adapters for that in there. Some measurements and conversions and such printed out. All sorts of weird things in there. I've already told you about mounting my drill press on top of this cabinet to save a little room. So this is a Craftsman half horsepower drill press. I've had this somewhere between 5 and 10 years, and I honestly can't remember where it is in that time span. I like having it, but I've kind of regretted this one because I've always had deflection here in this head. I can never get it secure. There's some people that talk about disassembling the entire thing basically and kind of reworking it. I've never really wanted to get into that. So I always get a little bit of deflection here, and it's not the greatest thing for like perfectly starting a hole in something all the time, which kind of sucks when it's a drill press, but for the most part I can get the job done with it if I need to, as long as it's nothing terribly complicated that requires great precision. It's still nice to have around. This thing is, I suppose you'd call it a hand-me-down sort of deal. Like I told you earlier, my father was a mechanic for a large part of his life, and this was actually his. And basically he just, once he retired and he's got older, he can't really work on a lot of stuff. So essentially this got handed down to me. And a lot of the tools inside are actually from him as well. So I was very lucky to start off with a lot of good tools and access to a lot of good tools. This thing is pretty old. It is from, I believe the bottom box is from 1985 and the top box is from 1987. So it's been around a long time. It's actually just before, I think, at least according to him, just before when they really started coming out with all the roller bearings for the drawers. So it does not have roller bearings, but I try to keep them greased up with some white lithium grease. Some of them are kind of tough in spots, but for the most part it still works quite well, and I'm glad to have it around. So we'll start by opening up the top here. This is where I keep the majority of sockets, and again, a lot of these came from my father, so this is a lot of snap-on stuff that he had bought, and then a lot of the metric stuff I kind of filled in on my own because most of the stuff I do is with metric stuff. A lot of spare sockets over on the side, or just really large sockets that don't fit in all the organizers. I've got kind of organizers I made up here out of some mats for some spark plug sockets that I use a lot. I'll talk more about those in a minute. Over here, some mechanics gloves. That's basically what the top drawer is. I try to keep this closed most of the time. Again, it's a lot easier to dust the top of this than it is to dust all of those tools. All right, let's go through here. So, top drawer, we got some circlip, snap ring pliers, that sort of thing, a seal puller, another seal puller, different kinds of cutters, hacksaws, and then some spare bits. Second drawer, screwdrivers, lots and lots of screwdrivers in there. This is another place where you can see I've used these tray kits that I was talking about earlier, these organizers, really handy for this stuff. I don't do anything too fancy here, just we got picks, we got more specialty stuff, short and small screwdrivers, Torx, and different specialty stuff in there. This is one snap-on set that I just keep together, some larger tools out here, and some JIS drivers down here, Japanese Industrial Standard I think it is. Definitely need those if you're going to work on Japanese scooters and motorcycles. This is my metric wrenches and such. Mostly wrenches, line wrenches. Let's see, you have a shot there. Some line wrenches over here, ratcheting 12-point stuff over here, short metric, standard metric stuff. A couple of strap wrenches, some stuff that didn't fit anywhere else, and then some crowfoot wrenches. Same basic thing here, except this is all standard stuff. Got a couple of miracle wrenches down here, like this sort of weird stuff. Back when I used to have a turbo on my Mustang, it was really hard to get to the turbo, the flange bolts. So bent a wrench in half like that, and then you kind of work it at a right angle. And then the big drawer, start with what you can see. Some pneumatics, some air tools over here. I really don't use much of this anymore. I use the big impact gun a lot. If you need to take off wheels, tires, or anything that requires much force, that's great. I don't use the small one much because the electric Milwaukee impact will do most of that. Of course, cut off wheels. Some different stuff if you want to do porting with these grinders. This is pretty handy for resurfacing something, cleaning up a surface. And of course I got various bits and stuff. Air chisel, use it when I have to. You know, luckily it's not something I need to use very much on the scooters. Plenty of sanding rolls. I think when I was porting something one time, I got really carried away and thought I'd go through a lot of sanding rolls, so I went kind of wild and bought all these. So I've got sanding rolls and all sorts of sanding materials. Aluminum polishing kit. These are some drum sanding heads in there. Roll lock discs for the angle grinder there. And then some wire brushes, random accessories, and hole saws. We'll go through the small drawers here before we move on to the bottom box. A lot of handy stuff. Utility knives and razors and such. Vinyl application tools and spreaders and different things that come in handy. Spare razor blades, spare handles for razors, gasket scrapers, X-Acto knife and blades for that. And then I even keep around like these old paint scrapers, because for the riding mowers, when I have to clean those out, these actually kind of come in handy for just scraping all the grass and stuff out under the deck. Next up, files. Couple of rasps, I guess, but primarily files. Most of these are cheap stuff, like snap-on stuff from my father here, a couple of them, but the rest of it is basically just cheap stuff that I've got. These I think were Amazon, and they've turned out to be really good files. They bite in quite a bit. I've had cheaper Harbor Freight tiny files, and they just do not work the same as these do. These I think are Harbor Freight files. They work okay, but I would like to replace them in the near future with something a little nicer. I call this kind of the odd socket drawer. We got Torx and Allen sockets of various types, and a lot of those in various sizes, like some of these big ones. These are just a Harbor Freight set back here, because really the only time I use these for the most part is taking the wheels off of the T-Max, and I use one of these for the Aerox wheels on the back, but there's not a whole lot of stuff that I use these gigantic ones for. Just some random miscellaneous stuff. Some of the stuff was from my father. There's things in here that I don't even know why he ever needed it, but some of it it's just not worth getting rid of. I'll just hang on to it in case, you know, you never know. And the last little drawer, bunch of Allen keys. That's pretty much what most of it is. And then some shop kits with O-rings. These are a bunch of cheap copper washers I got off of Amazon, I think, a kit. They come in handy like if you need a new drain plug washer and you don't want to pay a dealer price or go try to find one from a dealer, that sort of thing. Now we can dive into the bottom box. So top big drawer here. This is a lot of stuff that honestly I don't really use much. We got gigantic sort of prying and hammering sort of tools back here. Nice to have in case you need them, but you hope not to need that sort of stuff too often, especially not, I do mostly, you know, small, you'd call it light duty stuff, I guess, with scooters. Brake tools, a lot of brake tools primarily for automotive. A lot of them, well, basically all the brake tools were from my father. A I've kept them around because I do still do brakes on cars and things like that on occasion. Some air conditioning tools, various little bits here. Let's see. This is my ratchet drawer now. So this is another one where I was very lucky and I got a lot of these hand-me-down from my father. But you can see I've organized this recently. When I did the whole garage process, I also went through the entire toolbox and reorganized everything. And this is one of the drawers I really liked that turned out well. So these are anti-fatigue mats here, and I just cut them out. It takes a lot of time, to be honest. I mean, you will spend hours and hours if you're gonna do much. I think this one drawer took me at least a couple of hours, because first off, you gotta figure out how you want everything laid out so it actually fits. That can take a while, just kind of reorganizing stuff until you get it right. And then second off, you've got to go around everything and trace it out and cut it out so that it's a snug fit in there. But once you get it done, it's pretty nice. Now, I didn't actually have the room. It would be awesome if I could lay everything out embedded in here, so you just pop it out and put it back in. But with all these extensions and different things, there's just not room. So for some of this, these are just like long cutouts, basically making a tray inside of there for the extensions and stuff to go in. But a lot of it is like these little adapters. Just use a big punch. That'll fit right nice, snug in there. And I've actually really got to like this because when you're doing work, I was working on a friend's car a few weeks ago, and since it's a friend's car, we were working inside of it doing some stuff to the seat, and you don't want to lose something or leave it behind. So it's kind of nice when you can just look in here and say, okay, like, you know, I've got a ratchet missing, where did it go? So you know you got to look for that ratchet. Not something I want to do to every drawer in the toolbox. Some things, if you were going to change around much, it wouldn't make much sense because then you'd have to totally redo this. But I've really liked it here. I think it really comes in handy. Keeps everything nicely organized and in its own place. Same thing here with a hammer drawer. My father had a lot of hammers and I tossed some out. Some of these are my own, some are his, but like for example, he had 4 of these ball peen hammers. I gave 2 away to friends because I could not for the life of me figure out why anybody needs 4 of these. Like literally, these 4 hammers, the 4 ball peen hammers have been around as long as I can remember. And none of them have broke, so I think I'm safe in keeping 2 around. Some of these you'll have to create a little indent in there because otherwise that would be really hard to get, but make a little indentation, then you can put your thumb in there or something and pick it right up. Plier drawer. Now this one was another one that saved a lot of room with organization. So initially with this drawer, pliers were just basically tossed in here. And I had, I believe it was basically every set of pliers that you see down here on this front row was in here. And then all of these were in another drawer. So I picked up these organizers off of Amazon. Again, look in the description. I'll put a link in there if I can. And it was a 2-piece set, so turns out it basically fits perfectly across the length of this drawer. And just storing them like this makes such a huge difference on how much space they take up. It's pretty unbelievable. It was well worth doing because again, that freed up more space, so then I can move bigger pliers that I currently had, that I had in another drawer down here, and keep everything together. I recently bought these hose pliers, hose clamps to kind of shut things off. So if you're taking like a fuel line off, you can clamp it down with that. I gotta say they're not as effective as I like. Somewhere in here, there we go. I've actually got a set of these, and I just put some hose over there, and these actually work much better for clamping off a fuel hose, like a small fuel hose on a scooter. Now this, I kind of call this my tool porn drawer because I just like these things. I don't know. For whatever reason, I guess I'm kind of strange, but I like working with some of these precision instruments and taking measurements. Sometimes it frustrates me because it can be hard to get a very precise measurement of some things, but I don't know, sometimes I just enjoy it. It's kind of relaxing to me. So anyway, you can see I've done this one with the anti-fatigue mat. By the way, I don't think I mentioned it. I ended up buying this stuff on Amazon because my local Harbor Freight was out of stock, but the cheapest way to get this stuff is to go into Harbor Freight if you've got that. The last time I looked, it was about $10 for 4 2-foot by 2-foot squares, so you can do a decent bit of the toolbox. This one is double thickness because the backs of these have the mounts and stuff. So I had to go double thickness on that to make everything fit right. But yeah, same kind of deal. I've got micrometers here. This was my father's, an old NSK. I got a Mitutoyo, however you're supposed to pronounce it, for the 0 to 1 inch. This is 1 to 2 inch. 2 to 3 inch, this is a Fowler. All of them seem to work pretty well. The Mitutoyo is definitely a high quality piece, but I'm not so sure. I mean, I think I could do the same stuff with a Fowler, so whatever. Dial indicators, Shars, some of them don't even have brands. I got a T-clock. Again, maybe mispronouncing that because that was recommended to me. But all of them actually work quite well. NeoTeck, there's multiple different versions of this. This is a digital dial indicator. Digital indicator, whatever. Which appears to be on. Hopefully I just turned that on. But anyway, yeah, that I use a lot for when I set up my racing ignition on the 2-stroke, and I've even got the adapter. I just keep it right in there with it. That's a nice tool, Amazon tool for, I think at the time, 30 bucks, probably, hopefully similar to the same. Now, dial test indicator. This is a depth gauge. Don't really need that much, but comes in handy occasionally if you're trying to measure how like deep a piston is in a cylinder, maybe for some reason at some point. And then we got bore gauges here, telescoping bore gauges. And these are small hole gauges. Mostly I've used those if I was trying to measure like the inside of a valve guide or something really tiny. And then some different angle gauges in there. This one is primarily, I use it for taps and dies. So these are metric and standard tap and die sets, all snap-on stuff. These are thread chasers, files, that sort of thing, for basically reconditioning threads rather than just recutting them. That's NPT, taps and dies in there. Some sort of leftovers and whatnot, some new stuff I haven't used in there. These are tap holders, and I recently got these, and this is another one of those tools where I don't know how I haven't had one for so long. So this lets you grab it, and then you can put a ratchet on there and use that to finish driving in a tap. So that can be quite handy sometimes. And then I've got a whole time cert kit here. I'm a big fan of the time certs. I think they work really well. They're basically thread inserts, like a helicoil sort of thing, but a little different version. So I've got that kit and metric in there. One of those things you don't want to have to use a lot, but nice to have around when you do. And then just a few flex hones, round flex hones. Don't really use those much now that most of the stuff I do with my 2-strokes are aluminum coated cylinders. But I used to use them a lot when I had steel or cast cylinders. That's another one. That's one of the drawers, like I said. You kind of wish you had the bearings on there. It's pretty tough at the end. Then we got basically a puller drawer, all sorts of different pullers. We got pulley pullers and 2-jaw and 3-jaw and some different stuff like that. Blind hole bearing pullers. The bottom is basically stuff that's in cases or boxes for the most part. All sorts of tools. A brake caliper tool. We've got a compression tester here from Snap-on. Actron compression tester. Rivet kits. Some stuff like Noid light set I needed one time when I was having some delivery issues on my Mustang. I think that's the only time I've ever used the Noid light set on the car. A little camera, I can't think what you call it now. All I can think is pinhole camera, and that's the wrong term, but yeah, like an inspection camera, just in case you want to get in somewhere. I think that thing was less than $10. It came in handy a few times. Crank install tool, case tools, case splitter tools, a C-clip installer, well, C-clipper they call it, the wrist pin installer. I've shown you that in the RC1 video. brake bleeding tools. So yeah, just stuff in boxes basically, and a valve spring compressor in there. Small drawers over here. This is sort of my junk drawer, I guess you could call it. I got some keys for different things. Manuals, I know, like you should throw these away, but sometimes they are actually kind of handy to have around, so I do keep some of the manuals around. Different like markers and such. Some batteries for different things, oil change stickers. Junk drawer. We got multimeter, amp meter, test light. Rarely ever use that because mostly you can do that with a meter, but sometimes they're kind of nice to use. And then a few digital scales. Scooter guy again, roller weights, who knows, weighing all sorts of stuff for the scooters basically. And then of course the thermometer, non-contact thermometer. Down here we got, this is a dial bore indicator. Really nice tool to have around if you're going to be inspecting cylinders. Again, I'm kind of a nerd that way, I guess. Sometimes I sort of enjoy that stuff for whatever reason. I'm sure some people probably hate it, but it's a Fowler. It's been a nice tool to have. Good precision as far as I can tell. Then got a bunch of feeler gauges and spark plug gauges and stuff in there. Solder, and my cheap soldering iron and some flux. I really need to get a better soldering iron. I guess I will someday, I keep saying that. Let's see. So this is a bearing and seal puller in a box. Soldering, the holder tool for soldering. And this is a couple of drivers that I've made myself. Apparently I need to do something with that. It started to rust, but just for driving seals in primarily. This one I made custom for the Minarelli engines. So these fit around different seals on the Minarelli very well. That's just PVC with an aluminum cap on it. Comes in handy for some seals. And this was one that I made for, not really made, it's just basically a piece of all thread with an adapter on there that I did make in the lathe for steering stem bearings. Oil filter wrenches. If you're gonna do oil changes, you're gonna need them. Let's see, there are dial indicator, magnetic bases, and some V-blocks over here. Really don't use them too much. I've got little bearing crank stands that I made up myself, but V-blocks do come in handy sometimes. Like I said, just various little mounts for indicators in there. This one is a sort of random drawer to me. It's stuff that I really don't use very much. A lot of I think basically everything in here was a hand-me-down from my father. Some of it I may need, so I just kind of hang on to it. Stuff like this was for doing points, like an ignition tune-up set. And honestly, the main thing I do with this is some of these little tiny wrenches have come in handy for me. I really doubt that I'm going to be working on points anytime soon, but hey, it doesn't take up that much space. Serpentine belt tools, distributor wrenches. Yeah, a lot of it I don't use very much in there, but just not worth getting rid of. And the last drawer here, not much in there. Some of these leftover organizer trays in here. I got an adapter for some tool that I can't even remember what it's for. Got some punches back here for numbers, and then of course a sticker drawer, gotta have that. These I got recently, transfer punch set. So basically with these, you just got like, say you want to make a pinpoint hole, you want to mark where a hole center is, but you got a large hole. So you got something like this where you've got like the larger shaft, but it comes to a point there right in the center, so you can put that through the hole and it'll mark the actual center of that hole. Comes in handy making a template or something like that. And yeah, that pretty much wraps up the toolboxes. Right next to that big toolbox is the 20-ton Central Machinery, which is Harbor Freight shop press. Not something I use a whole lot either. Comes in handy when you're pressing gears in, or you can press bearings in and that sort of stuff, or press things out. But for the price, it was well worth having. I'm glad to have it around when I do need it. There's the air compressor. When the workbench was built, we've had the compressor since before the garage was even there. So when I built the workbench, left a spot specifically to have that underneath of there to store it. Again, it's 25 gallons, so it's not really what you'd want if you were going to use a lot of air tools, but it's enough to get the job done around here. Over here, obviously we got a shop vac. Gotta have a shop vac. A 6-inch buffer. I put that on its own stand. I bought this back when I had my Mustang because I had a polished out, chromed out, whatever engine bay. Like, I pretty much turned it into a show car toward the end, under the hood anyway. So you gotta have a buffer if you're gonna do that sort of stuff. Most of the time I don't really use it a lot, but it is kind of fun when you want to polish something. It comes in handy. Just get this moped project that allegedly I'm gonna finish one day moved aside so we can see these welders real quick. You've probably seen them in videos if you watch my stuff, but I'll show them again anyway. These are barbecue grill covers, I think they were. They just come in handy for covering them up, keeping the dust off of everything. This is a Hobart Handler 140. This is the second welder that I've owned, the second flux core welder that I own. This one will also do MIG, although I've never actually set up gas on here. I probably should because that would be handy for me, but I just haven't done it. But I really like the flux core welding for a lot of stuff. It's the easiest kind of welding, in my opinion, to get into, and it can repair a lot of things, and it's pretty resilient to the environment. Down there is a plasma cutter. I actually got that for free for doing a review for the company. Cut 65 DS by Yes Welder. Works pretty well as far as I can tell. I really rarely ever use the thing because most of the time it just doesn't make sense to get that out and get it all hooked up for the kind of stuff that I'm cutting. I'll show you in just a minute what I normally use for a lot of the cutting. And then over here is the Yes Welder TIG 205 DS. Now it does a few processes, but I use this for TIG welding, if I can get it out. This was also given to me by some guys on the forum. Greatly appreciated. I did a review video about that. I'm a terrible TIG welder. I'm not a good welder of any sort, but I'm a terrible TIG welder, but it still comes in handy for a lot of different stuff. They gave me the tank and everything with it. And then below that is just the accessories for this welder specifically. The last area with tools that I'll show you is right over here, corner of the garage. This little mechanics cart here, that was given to me by my friends that worked in an auto parts store. They got it for free and thought I needed it, so I mounted my bench grinder to that. It doesn't really need wheels, it always stays here, but it's handy to have it on this. Store some various metal below that. And then this is the bandsaw, which I said I'd show you what I use to cut most metal. That would be the bandsaw. John from the forum gave me this, I guess probably a couple years ago. And I made a table for it. It's a portable bandsaw by Wen. And I made this aluminum table for it and put a bar on there so I can mount it in my vise. So normally I'll just move it over to the vise and clamp it in there when I want to cut something. But this is a really nice metal cutting tool. One of those things I kind of meant to try out, but I didn't, again, know how handy it was until I actually got one. And now I really like it. I use this for most of the kind of straight cuts that I would do in metal. Well, actually, a couple more tools. We just got this up here. I'll show you. These sit right over that. This is my wheel balancing rig. This is eBay or Amazon or something, like fairly cheap. And then these are what I use for crank truing and stuff. Just kind of made these up. It used to be a Chinese scooter crate that my Taotao, I think, came in. Put a couple bearings on there, welded it together. Take two of those, you can check out gears or a crank or whatever. Sort of similar idea to V-blocks. The bearings don't look like they move that well right this second, but if you spray a little WD-40 or put a little oil in there and spin them around, they move great. So, being a scooter channel, I suppose I should also mention my scooter workbench here. This is just a bunch of 2x4s, some cheap, I think it was 5/8 thick plywood on there on the top. I redid it. You actually should have saw that in the first garage makeover video by putting this paneling or whatever on the back here. I didn't have enough to finish the front. I wish I did because this has actually held up really well. with scooters going up and down on here all the time and doing work on here. The section in the center is diamond plate, aluminum diamond plate. The reason that I did that was because a lot of scooters have a center stand, and the center stand was digging into the plywood a little bit. This one in particular, I can actually use jack stands on this scooter the way it's set up, but again, those would probably dig into the plywood, so that little center section is really nice. Added bonus is because it's diamond plate. When you put tools down here, they don't tend to roll around, so that's pretty cool. The front of it is just the porch floor paint in black. Even the porch floor paint isn't holding up totally the way I'd like it. Main reason is because sometimes I'll work on something up here and just kind of turn the wheel like that, turn the tire like that, and that cuts through the paint fairly easily. I should stop doing that, but you know, it happens. But yeah, overall, this has been a handy thing to have. If you're just buying 2x4s and cheap materials, it's not very expensive. However, I have a T-Max as well, and that's a 500-pound bike. And that thing, with this, I just put a ramp on there and I roll it up the ramp. No big deal. The T-Max, that's not gonna happen because that thing is gonna tip over, tear the scooter up, tear me up, whatever. It just ain't gonna happen. I looked at motorcycle lifts a few years ago, and at the time I could get one for around $300. Maybe, I think maybe $250 if I used the coupon, could find the right coupon at Harbor Freight. And then, I believe literally a month ago, I went to look again thinking I could probably do $300 for a motorcycle lift. It would be kind of nice to get the T-Max up in the air. And then I looked at the prices and couldn't believe that now, I think it was around $600 for a Harbor Freight one, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong, maybe it was $500, but like a lot of things, dramatic price increase. And I just didn't want or have, you know, $500, $600 or whatever it wound up being to put into a motorcycle lift right now, because this does do the job for my small scooters. Most of the stuff on the T-Max I can do with it down in the floor, so I'm okay. I can jack it up or use my pit stand, can't think of what you call it now, paddock stand, whatever, to get it up in the air if I need to. But yeah, maybe someday I will get an actual motorcycle lift. For now, this thing does pretty well for small scooters. Well, I guess that about does it for my garage makeover update / toolbox and garage tour. Thank you to the folks that had suggested that I do something like this, because honestly, I would never think to give you a toolbox tour or show you around the garage, probably. It's just not something I even really thought people would be that interested in. But if you did enjoy it, please leave a like, comment, and subscribe for more. Also, if I missed something, if you've got a question that I didn't answer, it's possible I'll do a video. If nothing else, I will answer your comments in the comment section. So go ahead and leave me a message and I'll try to answer whatever questions you ask about my garage and tools. With that said, again, thank you very much for watching. I really hope you've enjoyed this, and stay tuned for more.